Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
Over the last 6 weeks of Lent in our message series that we've been calling No One Left Behind, we've been taking a deep dive into what it means to accompany someone on their journey of life and faith. Being a spiritual friend is a great honor, but it's also a sobering responsibility. We've talked about why you should have a spiritual friend, what characteristics of the person you choose should have, how the accompaniment process works, and where and when to learn and practice it. And in our short daily devotionals, we took an even closer look at each one of these topics. If you missed any of our prior messages in this series, or you want to get those devotionals, just go to our website, sthilary.org. Today is the last episode of the series. But before we leave it behind, we need to talk about the one essential ingredient that makes any spiritual friendship work. And without this ingredient, there's no hope of becoming spiritual friends or even maintaining such an intimate relationship. And that ingredient is trust. Trust is hard won, and it's easily lost. It's incredibly fragile. I know that this series has been kind of difficult for some of you because you haven't been able to get a spiritual friend. You don't have one. And so maybe you've felt a little left out of the loop during this series as a result. Or maybe you know someone who could be your spiritual friend, but you're a little afraid to ask. You haven't taken that step yet. Or maybe you've even scoffed a little at this series, thinking, I don't need a spiritual friend. I'm okay going it alone. Whatever the reason, deep down, I think the actual reason is lack of trust. It's usually a matter of trust. It could be that you've been hurt in the past. You know, somebody has betrayed you, someone close to you, and that cut to the bone, it hurt. And there's no way you're ever gonna let that happen again. Maybe you've closed yourself off. You have friends, you've got people that like you and you like them, but you're not gonna go there. You're not gonna go deep with them. You're gonna refuse to trust anyone with that kind of sensitive personal information ever again because you've been hurt. And I want to tell you, that's perfectly understandable. Betrayal hurts. That's why it's all over the Bible. Betrayal is everywhere in the Bible. In the book of Sirach, the author says, a wound can be bound up and an insult can be forgiven, but he who betrays secrets does hopeless damage. And the author of Psalm 41 also complains about people who speak dishonestly and spread lies. He says, my enemies say bad things against me. When someone comes up to visit me, he speaks without sincerity. His heart stores up malice, and when he leaves, he gossips. All those who hate me whisper together against me. They imagine the worst about me. Even my trusted friend has raised his heel against me. We hear this again from the author of Psalm 55. He's feeling alone, isolated, he's afraid. He's got a lot of mental distress because he has been betrayed. My heart pounds within me, he says. Death's terrors fall upon me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me. Why? Because his betrayers have accused him falsely. They've insulted and scorned and oppressed and schemed against him. They've committed fraud and they've broken their promises, and worse yet, they have flattered him falsely to his face. And betrayal is particularly painful when it's committed by someone close to us, a family friend, a family members, or a friend. We hear that from the prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament. The plot against him was hatched by his own brothers. Let us destroy the tree and its vigor, they said. Let us cut him off from the land of the living so that his name will be spoken no more. And then the author of Psalm 55 again says, you know, if an enemy had reviled me, that I could bear. If my foe had viewed me with contempt, from that I could hide. But it was you, my other self, my comrade and friend, you whose company I enjoyed, at whose side I walked in the procession in the house of God. Betrayal is everywhere in the Bible because it is a common human event and it hurts. But all of that is just a foreshadowing for the greatest act of betrayal known to human history, Jesus Christ. Not only was he betrayed and handed over to the authorities by the kiss of a trusted disciple, one within his own intimate circle of friends, not only did his disciples run away, not only did Peter publicly renounce him as he was being tortured, not only was he falsely accused and scorned and mocked and beaten, but all of this befell him in spite of his complete and utter innocence. And in the face of that unimaginable evil, what does Jesus do? He doesn't condemn Judas. He doesn't condemn Judas. He doesn't get mad at Peter. He doesn't abandon the rest of his disciples. He doesn't seek their vengeance. What does he do with them instead? He shares a meal with them, even though he knows what's going to happen. And there's a great detail in the story of all of this, the passion narrative from the Gospel of John. Today we read through the Gospel of Mark, that passion story. But the Gospel of John has basically the same story, but John adds an important detail. And in this detail, Jesus is at the Last Supper, and he actually takes a morsel from the table. He dips it in the herbs, and he gives it to Judas, who he knows is going to betray him. Now, some say that he dipped the morsel and gave it to Judas because he was identifying his betrayer. But actually, it was a gesture of forgiveness. You see, the use of the word morsel by John refers to a small piece of bread. The fact that Jesus took it and gave it to Judas alludes to the Eucharist. You know, the bread and the wine that becomes the body and blood of Christ. Jesus was inviting Judas to the table when he handed him that morsel. You see, even for Judas, there was the possibility of forgiveness. The possibility of a new beginning, despite what others would deem to be unforgivable. It takes trust to develop a spiritual friendship, but trust takes time, especially if it's been broken in the past. When I was a volunteer youth minister long ago back in Atlanta before I was a priest, the kids who were preparing for the sacrament of confirmation would go on a 3-day retreat. It was a long retreat. And during that retreat, they played a game called High, Medium, and Low, and they always did it late on Saturday night. And we would gather outside in small groups of about 6 kids each. Every group had an adult present, just in case things got rough. It was all dark outside, except for the candles that each member of the group had. And in the center of the circle of 6 kids, there were 3 stacks of cards. Each stack was labeled high, medium, or low. The names referred to the risk level of each type of question. low-risk questions were on green-colored cards, and they were the easiest. They might ask, how tall you are, or what your favorite color is, or what you like to do with your free time. The medium-risk questions were on yellow cards, and they were a little tougher. They would ask questions like, when you need someone to listen to you, who do you turn to? Or what do you like most about yourself? Or if God were sitting right here, what question would you ask him? And then there were the high-risk questions. And they were on red cards. And they were the most personal. Some of the questions would be, what has been the low point in your life so far? What has happened in your life that you're unable to forgive? What's one thing that you've done you've never told your parents? Talk about high risk. And the kids would go around in the circle and they'd take turns picking up a card, and they could choose from any of the stacks, high, medium, or low risk. There was no pressure. And all the kids would start with the easy questions, of course, and we'd go through several rounds of that until one brave soul picked up a yellow card, the medium risk card, and the other kids did the same. And we'd go through several rounds of that. Now, they could still pick up the easy, low-risk cards, but they decided that they were ready to go for the yellow cards. And then, eventually, one brave soul picked up a red card. And inevitably, almost all the other kids started picking up red cards as well. You see, trust was being built in that little group, but it took time. It happened slowly. And that's the same with trust being built in life. Trust does not come easily, and it takes time. But the sad thing is that many, many people do not trust at all. I was astounded in a 2018 survey that I read by the Pew Research Center. In that survey, nearly half of all Americans who were surveyed said that most people cannot be trusted. Nearly half of Americans surveyed said that most people cannot be trusted. Almost 60% said that most people, if given the chance, would try to take advantage of you. And more than 60% said that most of the time people just look out for themselves and they don't try to help other people. We have a problem with trust. But Jesus Christ trusted, even though he knew what would happen to him. He knew the suffering he would endure. He knew the death he would suffer, but he trusted anyway. And when he was betrayed, he forgave. If trust is an issue for you, if it's keeping you from spiritual friendship with other people, maybe today is the day to let that go. As we enter into the holiest week of the year, when we remember how the Son of God emptied himself and took the form of a slave for us, when we recall how the man of sorrows gave his back to those who beat him, and his cheeks to those who plucked his beard, and did not shield his face from buffets and spitting so that we could be saved. When we think of that and remember that, maybe we could ask him to help us trust again and have the courage to pick up that tiny remaining morsel of friendship, dip it into the bitter herbs of betrayal, and offer it to the one who has hurt us. Everyone needs a spiritual friend, someone to accompany them along the way to connect life with faith. But spiritual friendship requires trust. And trust requires taking a chance one more time. Whatever happens, whatever you choose to do, you will have a spiritual friend in God's time, when the time is right. Don't worry. It will happen if you open your heart. In the meantime, Jesus will always be your spiritual friend. He will never leave you. He will never betray you. But he will challenge you. He will challenge you to utter those unimaginable words that he uttered on the cross. Words that could lead to new life and hope for you. And those words are, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.